When we start a data engineering project, we usually think about data sources, the quality of the data, the design of the data, well as the data platform architecture and data governance. But what is data governance? What is it and how does it help us? So in today's presentation, we are discussing the Medallion Architecture, and we're going to show how we can leverage that architecture to be able to enable data governance on a data platform. So welcome to today's presentation. My name is Oscar. I'm a tech. I work on AI technologies as well, and I'm also the author of the Data Engineering Process Fundamentals book. A lot of the materials that we cover here today, basically from that book and from a GitHub repo that you have access to. I'll be sharing the link to you guys right now, if you give me a minute. If you see that link at the bottom, I'll copy that on the chat. But quickly, let's do that. All right, there you go. So this is a GitHub repo, and all the material is there. So so you can follow after the presentation. But let's start with the data engineering process overview. So in reality here, what we kind of do for a process-oriented approach is that we actually follow certain steps, right? We follow discovery, we do design and planning, we work on the data pipeline and orchestration and data warehouse, as well as data analysis, visualization, and data governance. In today's presentation, our focus is mostly on the data warehousing, data lake, data warehousing, and how to enable that architecture to facilitate data governance. So we start with the concept of Medallion Architecture. What is it? What is its purpose, right? So think of a Medallion Architecture as a data management approach. And its goal really is to organize the data in layers that are based on the quality processing level. So different layers, right, based on quality and processing level. What does that mean? So usually when we're working on a data engineering process, right, we get data from remote, just like CSV files, JSON files, even data streaming. So how do we consume this data and how do we process this data in a way that is modular? We can also trace it back to its source, right? How do we do that? So at that point, we have to start thinking about a different we can use to enable us to do that, right? The goal here is to improve data quality, right? Because when we ingest data, usually it's a raw data, it's not in the shape that is needed for us to be able to process that data into our data warehouse. So our goal is to improve that data quality, basically, right? Enhance the data governance too. So, and that's what gets a little more into the details of this presentation. What is it, right? What is this data governance? But if you haven't worked on projects like that, data governance is clearly the ownership. Who is trusted to consume this data? Who can process this data, right? So you have to enable, and also you have to provide traceability. Where does this data come from? Is it from an approved data source and so on, right? So basically what it means, of course, there's a lot of policies that govern that, like expiration, access, security, many things like that. But the goal here is to enable this process in such a way that we have traceability on all these areas. And ultimately also to accelerate insights, right? By optimizing the data, right? Not just creating some raw data without any optimization. We want to be able to facilitate the data in such data scientists that you can create dashboard and do data analysis in a way that is easier to consume, right? And of course, also we need to worry about scalability. By layering this data process, we can scale being enabled to grow our data volumes, right, in the complexity of the data process. And so you're going to hear me talk about making it more modular, different layers, and be able to process the data in different stages to optimize it, right? And optimize it is make it available to consumers, right? And definitely, at the end of the day, everything is a business. So we have to have cost, right, in mind. So we need to be conscious of how efficient this cost is. All right. Okay, so let's continue here. So let's start with the first zone, right? What we call the road, which is really is the staging or the foundation of your data lake, right? This is really the area where it is an listing or landing place for raw process data, right? And because of its nature, if you're not familiar with a data lake, is really more like blob storage that enables us to store large amounts of data, right? And this could be CSV, Parquet, compressed files, JSON files, and so on, right? And the data usually, the way we do it is when we do the right, we get this JSON data. We copy the data as is without any cleaning or any transformation. And the purpose behind that is because you want it for traceability, for historical purposes, right? For your data governance, to be able to understand how the data arrived to your system so you can trace it back to issues, right? If something happens downstream, you'll be able to say, okay, we get it, we understand the source of this data and what happened, right? When it comes to data lake, we need to worry about data retention policies. We don't want to have data there stored for 5 years if you don't need to. So those rules need to be defined, and those are governance rules, right? Those policies are part of that governance to be able to understand how your data is going to be, how long you're going to have retention on that data, right? So what we have to kind of think about when we're using a data lake is how do we leverage this data lake consumer, right? Is a data scientists and dashboards are going to connect to this raw data or what? And the answer is no. It's just the raw data, and it's just a staging environment for us to be able to process that data. Okay, so but that's the first step, right? So now we have to start thinking external tables. What is an external table, right? How does that work? And basically that is really the gateway for a data from a data lake. Okay, the benefits of this is really to preserve the original data for potential future analysis, governance, and to be able to understand the lineage and to audit that data, right? Lineage and how to audit that data. Lineage, and we'll talk about more of that, but in reality, picture of you got the data a point A and you go through B, C, D, E. You go through a series of steps